Today's topic, you can talk about the, you can name it anything you want. The bottom line, what we're going to learn today, how you can generate KQL, SQL without pre-programming, without programming knowledge, how you can generate using natural way, using the GPT-4o, and then how you can bind it to a chart controls, right? So that's, I have some demo built into it. I will walk through the technology used and how you can do yourself to do a data visualization by asking GPT model to. I'm going to use a GPT-4o model, but you can do the similar thing in other vendors too, Google or AWS. They may have some models. I don't know what models they support to generate KQL and SQL, but I'm sure they do have something. That's the topic today. We'll run. There is not a lot of PowerPoint slide, but I will touch few technologies that we talked in the past. If you need more details of those technologies, you can go back and watch videos, or you can go to the YouTube and search the videos, or go to the Microsoft Learning site. You can find more information. As I said before, the topic we can talk about today is driven dynamic data querying and visualization. I put everything reverse here. KQL and SQL. So bottom line, we're going to learn how to use a GPT model to generate KQL and SQL by using the natural prompt. This is a little bit about me. My full name is Udaiappa Ramachandran. You can call me Udai. I work for a company called Akumina as a CTO, CSO, and I'm also in Microsoft MVP for the last 3 years. I play in this space, Microsoft Azure, AWS, and Google. I spend most of my time in Microsoft Azure, worked several projects in AWS. I have learning experience in Google, not real projects. You are here, this Meetup group, meetup.com/UG. As I said before, please reference to your coworkers and techie friends. Today's agenda, we can talk about some introduction, of why we need this and the key features, how it works, and technologies that we're going to play today, and then how the real world application looks. And then the demo, we're going to build it together. I already have the demo. I have the links, but we will run it how you can you can download and play with it yourself. I mean, why we need for the simplified data interaction, right? So if organizations are increasingly relying on the data to drive decisions, right? It can be a sales data, any data, you can name it, right? Even in the developer space, we're looking at the task, we're looking at the defects, we're looking at the stories. We still need to interact with those data to find out, which story contains and all those things, tasks and defects and so on. So, so we have a vast amount of data collected from multiple data sources, right? You have data from the social field, you have data from the analytics field, we have databases, we have log analytics, right? Like a logging for the application. If you have the application, decades ago, we most likely not to log everything, but today, if you build an application, you're going to log a crazy amount of data because you don't want to find a problem after the problem happens. You want to have the data recorded so that if there is a problem, you have the information, right? So today's world, if you build an application, we technically going to log crazy amount of data. And so there is a data from everywhere, database logs and so on. The challenge in the current query method is, it's predefined, right? So if you want to look at a couple of data, first thing is you need to know the syntax, right? You can Google around it. Now you can use AI to write a query for you, but you still have to. If there is no AI, you still have to go through and then remember the syntax, and you need to frame it. You need to search around. It's a waste of time. Even if you know syntax and everything, in order to bring the data together, you have to have a predefined path. For example, you want to have page views, right? So you need to write a query, the field that contains the page view, and then you need to aggregate, and then you bring it back. Now somebody asks something else. I want to, one view you want to have a page and views, and the other view you want to have a page, URL views. Now you need to write another query, right? And then you want to have more data, you need to write another query. You keep writing the queries that you're fixing it. It's not going to dynamically give you the data that you want, right? And that's a challenge today. We have to manually frame the queries and then do all those things. That's the gap between the natural language and queries, right? This is the disconnection between the way we naturally ask questions and technically process of the querying of the data. This creates the barrier for the business users, analysts, and even developers who want quick insight without writing queries. That's what we're going to use the GPT-4 to solve this problem, right? GPT-4 solves because it's a multi-model. Before GPT-4o or 4 or 4o, you have to use a different model for converting from text to SQL for the SQL queries alone. But since GPT-4 is a multi-model, it can generate a SQL, it can generate a SQL, it can generate an image, it can take one language. You don't even have to speak in English, right? So you can type something in a foreign language. It understands what you're asking, and it translates back to whatever the underlying data source and get you the data back. Those are the cool things. It's the complexity and involved on the querying the data. I didn't go to the play. So that's a new way to query the data, right? So this converts natural language prompts into a KQL or SQL queries. It's a seamless integration that you're going to see today, Log Analytics and CosmosDB. For example, show me the page views in the last 24 hours, right? But if you have to write this query, you have to say whatever the table name, and then you need to follow the KQL syntax and where class and aggregate function. There may be some errors, and then you have to either remember or copy syntax of the date time and all those things. But today we're going to see naturally speaking, show me the pages views in the last 24 hours. It's going to generate that query, and we're going to run it and then return the data. So it's going to generate the query for KQL. If it is a SQL, corresponding columns that, whatever we're going to ask, it's going to map to the table that we feed in as a meta prompt. I will walk you through what is a meta prompt, what is the persona. When we talked all those things in the previous topics, but I will touch the topics a little bit when we do the demo. It supports the real-time data interaction across, workspaces and databases. Workspaces here is a Log Analytics. They call it as a workspace, and then the databases, it can be any database. In this today, we're going to use CosmosDB as CosmosDB SQL API as an example, but you can write against any database engine. For example, SQL Server or MongoDB or whatever database of your choice. So here's the whole core feature that we're going to look at it, right? KQL and SQL integration. It's a flexibility depending on the data source. Semantic kernel. We're going to use a semantic kernel to do all these transformation from the natural language to get the query, right? We take a user input, we pass to the semantic kernel, and it translate back to the KQL or SQL based on what provider we're going to load. It's a natural language query to a query conversation. We don't need to write any manual queries. And, as I said before, you have a query page and page views count, and then now you need a URL. Again, you need to write another query. You don't need to do it. You just send to that natural command, okay, include URL. It's going to include the URL and show you the data. And I'm a C# developer. I'm mainly a backend developer for last 10 years or so. I used to be a front-end developer, but Blazor seems to me easy for me to write an app. That's the only reason I selected Blazor. But you can do the same thing in any UI framework you want to use. We're also going to see Azure Speech Service. To take from the voice to a text. Either you can go text to a SQL or voice to text to SQL. Transforming prompts into queries, as I said before, users inputs the prompts like get all events in the last 7 days. It now translates, GPT process it and transform into a KQL or SQL based on how we load. Queries are executed in real time. The GPT engine is not going to execute it. All it's going to give us the query. We ask the query, and then we take the query. Then we run another code to return the data. Right? And the results are displayed in an easy understandable format because it's going to aggregate it and bring it to you. And I also put some chart control, which we can use it. So technologies powering this demo, you're going to use a C#.NET Core. I'm a C# developer, so my demos most likely going to be C# driven. And Blazor for the UI, Azure OpenAI for the multi-model to take from text to SQL. It's a concept, but That's how we're going to use it. Speech service for voice to text, and Log Analytics and CosmosDB is a couple of databases to as a sample, but you can bring it in as many databases you want. All right. Here's some real world applications that you can play with it, where you can use this kind of techniques, data analysis, perform a complex data analysis using a natural language. If you take now we're going to talk about it in the next month. What is that application? I forget it. The Power BI driven applications, right? There you can bring it in natural languages. Now, this is how they do it. They take your schema, they take your natural input, and then from the schema they generate the query, and then they display the data. So that's what we're going to see how it might work in the Power BI natural driven reports. Business intelligence about non-technical user can analyze the data, right? So our business user, they don't need to write any query to see the data. We don't have to share them the Log Analytics workspace in a read-only mode or CosmosDB in a read-only mode. They can come to the prompt wherever we provided, they speak to it and they get the data right away. Automated reporting, visualization for simple prompting tool. It can be anything, but today we in my work experience, we store a lot of data on the Log Analytics because it's quick and efficient. But you can bind it to any data source you want. Future use case may be AI-powered business intelligence tools, predictive analysis, and more. There's a lot you can do here, right? So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do a demo. So in the demo, the first thing what I use here is the Copilot Chat Web API. So if you go back to this link here, this is Chat Copilot. We had a couple of presentations on this, how to build the chat application. So this is a sample application. This uses the Semantic kernel, right? The latest and greatest of the Semantic kernel. You can look at it. This code I downloaded, I believe 3 days ago. So you have pretty much latest code, or 4 days ago, I guess, latest code possible here. There's a lot of company take this code, modify it, and then build the application top of it, right? This explains all the cool concept of how you can leverage Semantic kernel, but this particularly works out of the box with the OpenAI or Azure OpenAI model. If you have to bring AI from the AWS or AI from the Google, you still have to write. They provide interfaces, you still have to write, but out of the box, it supports the OpenAI and Azure OpenAI that you can use it. Okay, so that's the application we're going to use. In order to use this application, so I'll go walk you through. So let's stop here. So that's the application we're going to use. In this application, we're going to use two models. One is the chat completion model, which is what we're going to use a GPT-4o or 4. 4 is slower than 4o, at least 3 to 10 times slower than 4o. So in this case, we're going to use a chat GPT-4o. The second is the embedding model. The embedding model plays the role how it takes the, your user inputs to match with, right? Somebody can, it depends how you type, right? Pages, you can write, PAGS is the right word. You type EGS, right? It can use the embedding model to similarities and then find the right, transform into the right words. A context, right? The similarities. So what, instead of typing PAGS, you type PAGSE, then it knows, okay, you are looking for a page, right? So it's going to use. Those are the two models we need. But in this configuration, there is a lot more models that you can configure, okay? You can, if you go down here, you can configure kernel memory from the internal to external. You can have all the other queue services which you don't need. We are not going to look at it. But if you look at it, a search, if you want to bring a data searches, the rack pattern, you can do it. I hide it because I have the key inside, but this is the parameter API key, and then the endpoint deployment model, API type, and max retrace. And OpenAPI embedding do the same thing. If you do, that's for Azure OpenAI. But if you want to do OpenAI, and you can look at it and provide all the information over here. Okay, this is pretty simple. Download and play with it. So the way that we're going to run, we download this app. We did not modify anything. We just downloaded it. We only provided those two parameters, OpenAI chat completion and the embedding. And then we're going to run this one, right? So right click, debug, start instance. Okay. This is going to bring a REST endpoints. While it's bringing the REST endpoint, here is the code, another code that we are talking about, the concept of the talk today, right? So that code is coming from AI query visualizer. It's under my Git repo. So if you go back over here, and you can see it and download it. I have put some documentation with the help of ChatGPT, so you can do it over here. But now what we're going to do, I will walk you through the code. Before that, I'm going to run here, right click, debug, start new instance. Okay. So here is the interface, right? So in the home interface, I explained, right? So how you can configure the chat application. First, to clone this repository, which I already talked through. And then you open the solution, open the settings, and then complete those two endpoints. That's all you need. And then right click and then run that one. But how you can configure a query visualizer, right? You clone this repository and then open app settings, and you're going to say the chat endpoint. So what is the chat endpoint? So you running this repo, right? So this is going to give you endpoint for you. So where is it? Okay, here it is, right? This is the chat endpoint, which gives you many endpoints. One is for chats, how to post a message and how to document everything. You can download, you can learn it, you can start building your own product here too. I will walk you through a couple of REST endpoints, how we're going to use it, but the core and core, we're going to use this one. This is the endpoint that you have to copy it, right? So you go back over here, open the app settings, and then you put what is the endpoint, the base endpoint, chat base endpoint URL, HTTP localhost colon 44304. If you're running a public endpoint, then you can just leave that endpoint over there. Then this is the two data source we're talking about it. The first data source is a Log Analytics, which is the previously called App Insight, but everything is coming to a Log Analytics workspace. So that Log Analytics, you need to define a workspace ID, tenant ID, client secret, and system description. So you do not need a tenant ID, and client secret if you configured your Log Analytics workspace as a local auth mode. What does that mean? It's a keyless connection. You don't have to provide a key, right? You want to connect using a keyless connection, you can configure. Again, that's not the talk of the topic today, but we talked in the past. You can go and watch the videos. So you are more secure, securely hosting, you are hosting your application much secure. Your primary concern is the security. You wouldn't be completing the client ID and client secret. You just have to put a workspace ID, and then wherever this application running, if you're running in a local machine and if your user is an Azure Active Directory user, then you're good. You can communicate it. If you're running this application in the cloud, then you have to take identity and then enable that identity as the service principal and make sure that identity has the required read access to access the Log Analytics workspace. Okay, but for this demo, I put a client ID and client secret because I'm running in a different mission which has no principals enabled. But if I run in the cloud, I'm most likely to turn on the identity and then configure that way. The second data source that we talk about here is the CosmosDB. CosmosDB need an endpoint and the corresponding key, database ID, container ID. Again, you don't have to give a key here. If you enable the local auth, also known as keyless connection, then you don't have to give the key here. There is a set of permissions that you need to turn it on. Again, if you go and watch the previous videos a couple of months or 3-4 months back, you can understand how you can configure the keyless authentication. Okay, but if you notice, they both contains the system descriptions. So what is the system description is? That's how I set who you are, right? So it is must. So when I click on the KQL Insight, I'm going to override the system description set on this particular place. Okay, that system description is going to tell me you are a useful bot. Here is my table name. You're going to take this table name and You do the data, these are the columns, and then all the conditions that I want to. It's kind of you instructing how this chat persona is going to look like. Someone call it as an agent, someone call it as a meta prompt, someone call it as a persona, but they all come into the same picture, same context. Okay, so you're going to tell it, you are a bot. This is what it is, how you want to process it, how you want to respond to it, how there is something goes wrong, how do you want to respond it. You provide all the instruction on the system description. When we create a chat session, we're going to set that as a system description. Okay. Similarly, the CosmosDB, we're going to set, okay, you are so and so, here the data are, how you're going to behave. That's what we set it. But if you look at this application, this is mostly a singleton, but you can override that. This semantic kernel itself is a singleton pattern. They use a heavy singleton pattern. But they also provide the override, how you can override these personas, not on the service itself, but you can override the personas. But in order to override the service, that's what we did. You need to write a crazy number of codes. But that's more than enough for us to run this demo. How you can set the persona, run the query, and then change the persona, run the query. But in the query itself, the memory is retained. So you ask one question, say, for example, give me the last 5 top pages, right? And then it gives you, and then you want to redefine that, only for last 24 hours, right? You don't have to give the entire context. It can retain your chat history and then constantly apply all those things and bring you the data that you finally asking for. Okay, so now if I go back to this repo over here, there is an example I put as a system description. This is the exact description that I'm using. I will not be able to open the app settings because I forgot to replace some of the sensitive keys. It's not that you're going to take it, but it is that keys I cannot recycle it immediately. It will take another 1 week to recycle. So, but trust me, this is the exact description I set on the meta prompt. You are a helpful bot that generates KQL queries using the app page views as a table. The available columns in this table are tenant ID, time generator, name, URL, and so on, right? So I given a lot of columns over here. But I stopped. But once I stop there, it generates me a KQL, but often it gives me the invalid syntax, meaning that it can put wrong syntax, few things arranged in a different way. I wasn't happy. So I need to tweak that prompt. So I tweaked that prompt based on what the feedback I received from the GPT, right? So then this is my feedback. When constructing queries, you summarize, right? Operator aggregations, summarizing data, avoid using extend. But what it did is, sometimes it'll give me a summarize, other times it'll give me the extend. The moment it gives me the extend, the query execution fails. But I need to instruct that to not use extend. I'm not looking for extend. Every time you give me the data, use summarize pattern, right? Now it will never ever touch extend. It'll always touch the summarize function. I also say, always name the result as a count, because in my chart, I'm looking for a field called a count, right? You can always return count as a second column. Right. So, in case if you're programming, index of 0 is the x-axis, index of 0 is the y-axis. That's one way of treating the system, right? I say always name the result or count as a count. So when it returns the result, they're always going to the count whenever the summarize function is applied. When the first summarize function is applied, it's going to have the count. And then my instruction goes, only project the required columns. So, as I said before, right? So if you what is the problem today? You need to look at the data. You need to know the column that you want to look at it, right? So in the page views is a good example, right? The page name count. And now it is okay to see the URLs, right? Now you need to ask URLs. It is going to give me the URLs. Until I ask URLs, I don't want the system to return a URL. So I say only project the required columns based on the user's input or task. Okay, the extend operator is for creating a new calculated fields and modify existing fields. However, do not use over keyword in conjunction with the extend operator. So these are some of the instructions that I used it, how it fails and tweak it. Not necessarily someone else should have the same exact prompt. But you're going to play with it, you see the problems when it fails, and then you can constantly change the system prompt, right? And also known as persona. You just keep playing with that prompt and then setting it. Similarly, for the Cosmos DB, this I use a slightly different table name and the field name, but here I give it, for the log analytics, there is the exact system description. But for the Cosmos DB, I use a different system description in the demo. But what I put here is not exactly I use in the demo, but same concept. The document is a container follow the structure of the following column names in a partition key, row key, first name, last name, email, and the department ID, whatever it is, and generate query, always project, same thing that we did for example, is null should be equal to null, right? What happened is this started giving me the syntax called is null, but sometimes the Cosmos DB SQL APIs may violate that syntax. So as you run the query, see the data, if something is wrong, you can tell, you can go ahead and set the system prompt, then you rerun it. I mean, you are not going to set the system prompt on the fly. That's like fixing your code, right? So you're going to say, you're going to fix the system prompts and then you rerun it, then it will work everything correctly. You just is an iterative process. You set the prompt and then see the result and then tweak the prompt. Okay. That's this application works, right? So let's go back here. So before I dive into that demo, so let me quickly touch this demo. There is this one, right? So I know you may meet, if you ever played with chat, Semantic kernel, mainly this chat application, you probably know how this works. We use almost all the APIs here. The first thing you have to know is the chat post. Okay, so that's the first thing you're going to do. So you try it out, and then you type something here. Write something about Boston in one sentence. I don't want to waste a lot of dollar on getting the tokens because it's buildable tokens. Okay, so this is going to, sorry, this is just a title. It can be anything. It can be my chat or whatever it is. So what I'm doing by here, I'm setting the prompt, okay? I'm setting who you are. I'm setting the persona. That's all. This is how I initiate the chart, right? If I want to initiate, in my other user want to initiate a chart, he may name it something. So here I can say title as an about Boston, but it does not matter. It just is just a title for you to call it as, but it doesn't matter what you give over here. Okay. So all it returns me a few things here. It returns me the ID. It returns me the description. It returns me the safe description. In this case, safe description is same as the system description. That's how we treat it. But you can do a safe description as a different format on that system description. In this case, if you look at it, system description will be provided by the chat session initializer. If you download the original app from the portal, they will have the system description like, you are on bot, you do blah, blah, blah. The sample that I showed you, they will have an example of how the system description is. But in this case, I'm using the application to run the chat session. But system description, I'm going to feed in from the backend, our front-end application. Okay, that's going to feed in the system description. Once you have this ID, which you need it, you copy this chat session ID, right? And then you go back to messaging API. Okay, so you do the messaging API, and then you put the chat ID, and then you set what is the input. This is where you're going to say, write about Boston, right? Write about Boston. And then you can say, I have some samples how the payload look like. Copy this payload. We can run it, but I don't expect this is to work correctly. The reason is we did not set the proper system description, but it may work because it can be a there it is. Oh, it did. Okay, it did write it. So because it's a very generic case, so it didn't write it. Even you put something wrong, it may go through a generic pattern to understand what you are asking for. I did not set a proper persona definition, but still it found something and returned me, right? These are the two APIs. The reason that I was explaining over here, these are the two APIs we're going to use to build our app, to generate KQL SQL. There's one more API that I'm not showing you over here, which is going to be chat.chatid, which is the patch API. Here. So this API. So this is the patch API that we're going to set the system description. You cannot, there is one way you can set a system description, part of this invoker, like when you initialize this system session, but unfortunately the framework, the semantic framework is not taking it. You have to, call this explicitly and then set the system description, then you sending the message, right? That's enough. Let's go back to the application. So I go back to the application over here, and I'm going to speak to it, find top 5 pages. Okay, now I can change whatever chart. I put the sample chart here. Again, these are samples for you to play with it. I just run it. Okay, so I got the data, right? It puts the chart, again, you can change it, whatever chart you want, and do it. I want to change this chart here, pie chart, maybe I can speak to it again within 24 hours. I'm going to run it. You can buy. So in the 24 hours, these are the charts, right? Data, right? But you remember, first time I asked top 5 pages. Now I did not retain the context. I asked within 24 hours how it knows, because we are chatting in the same chat session. Okay, that's how it knows. So we initiate the chat, it gives the chat ID. In the chat ID, we send the first query, and then we asked, okay, within 24 hours. Now I can ask more, right? So if I go back to this example over here, where is it? This example over here. So let's pull some of the columns over here, right? So I'm going to find some columns. Maybe name, client type, client OS, let's say client OS maybe, right? So maybe user ID. No, user ID may not be there, might not. Okay. Let's say what is the easiest sample we have here. Tenant ID. URL, let's say URL, right? So let's go back to our chat interface here. Okay. Again, chatting it. Include URL. Run the query. Now you got the URL, right? But if you want to be the traditional way of it, you have to write 3 queries. First query to get, you can do some parameter passing it, but at least you need to frame that query. You need to construct that query, right? First query contains the where class, second query, and the third query. And if somebody asks more columns, then you will be keep building that query. But natural language, you don't need to. You just pass it in, it generates. Okay. So now how this works? So we're going to go back to the code here. It's a very simple code. Again, you can download from the Git repo that I'm pointing to. Even though it's a demo, but I try to follow little patterns, but not most of the time. I try to follow some patterns. So we have the interface. It has the one method called create chat session. The second method is sending your natural input to a GPT engine to get the KQL or SQL. And then we execute the query, right? So let's look at the KQL. So KQL inherits the query service. So because the query service, I put a common 2 methods. The first method is the create a session, right? Forget all the logging and how it sets the setter. You will get it once you step in the code. But the key is set the chat session. The chat session, we get a chat persona. We set the some title. I told you we need to set some title. So we set the title datetime.now, and then ID, we don't know what it is, but we set the system description. So I read it from the configuration. I set the system descriptions. Okay. This is how we initiate the chat session. And then we call the chat endpoint, we post the data, and then it returns as the created on, and we set it. But this is not a material here. You can skip the created on property. You don't need to. What you cannot skip is the ID property, right? So you must pass in the ID property. So you get the ID property from the response, and then you patch the chat persona. That's how it's going to set that context, and then your persona. Right? You'll be saying there, you are a KQL engine, a KQL agent, you're going to give me your awesome, nice KQL, right? That's what we do. Once we do that, we take that ID, and then the second time we're going to call the message to get the SQL or KQL in this case, because we're looking at the, this is common. There is one way it tells you which one it's going to look at it. There is a query type. So we have the query type. Based on the query type, we're going to use a KQL syntax or SQL syntax that only used within the system description. If it is a KQL, we're going to read the configuration of KQL system description. If it is a SQL, we're going to read the SQL description. But that's low weight. We don't need to worry about it. Now let's go back to the message. And the message is going to call in a common endpoint, chat, and chat session ID. And remember, I showed you the sample over here. So that's a user input. So I set like a top 5 pages. That's a user input. And we posting it to that method, and then it takes and it returns just the value. And we take the value and then we extract of the SQL. The way that the value comes in over here, right? It's not going to be exactly the KQL query. It's not going to give you, oh, here is your KQL query, right? It's going to give some verbiage behind, before and after, oh, blah, 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 and then the KQL, there is some syntax followed, right? So we will see how that syntax will look like. So if you go back to that method, it takes that one, and then, so there is a pattern in the pattern. So this is what I was telling you, right? So the pattern sometimes will come with the KQL, other time it comes with the Custo, other time it's SQL. KQL stands for Custo Query Language, right? SQL. And some other time it won't be anything at all. It simply comes the three backticks, right? And then followed by the state. This is where our work comes in. So we're going to, it's a iterative process. You keep playing with it and learn the pattern, how it comes, you cover for all the patterns. So, it can come in any of these patterns, and then you take the value. It can be single line, ignore case, because sometimes the KQL comes as a capital K or all capitals. You can tell the different combination of how the pattern is going to look like. And we take the value, and then the nice SQL comes in. Then what we do? So if you look at the KQL service that implements this query service, in the query service, you put a one method to be override on the implementer class, okay, abstract method. So KQL service is going to implement that abstract method, which is the execute query, which you can go back to the API /log analytics, and then whatever the workspace. Again, that workspace, I configured it over here, and then /query, it's going to go there and execute the statement. This is what I was explaining to you. If you are using if you are not providing the client ID, then it's going to presume that you configured everything to do a keyless connection. Then it's going to use the default credentials and get the token. If you are not configuring the default credentials, then it's going to assume that you have a client ID, client secret, which is kind of basic authentication, and then it creates a token, right? Then it sets it over there, gets the data, and then we just enumerate that into a key value pair and return back to the UI. So the UI itself is pretty simple. When you come back over here, just a one page, and we take the parameter, what type of query you are coming in, and there is some some headers over here, and then query type, chart type, and then I use some open source libraries, and then display the columns in the chart, display the chart, and here comes the syntax. If this is a system events and render chart if there is a data, and then user input, right? It takes the user input, and then this is what create chat and execute query. So if you look at it, first thing what you do, we get a session ID. But you can compose everything into a service code. But here for the demo understanding reason, I put everything here. So you make a chat service. Chat service is created based on the query type. Okay, chat service is going to be a get query service, which is the factory is going to tell you, if it is KQL, return that. If it is SQL, return that. Okay. Once the chat service is created, and you're going to call the method create chat session. That's where we're going to set the system prompt. It's going to return your session ID. We're going to use that ID until we sign out. If your user spaced, and you will have to handle it different way. But right now, that session ID is created per provider single time. But if you need to use per user basis, that it cannot be a singleton, but again, you have to use a user-based session. Token lifetime, and then you get the statement, and then you do that. Statement failed. This statement was a problem. Then it's going to give error, and then if the statement is succeed, we're going to call another method to return the result, and then we're going to return the result. Okay, and then update chart. Chart sometimes can fail if you don't have a proper numerical field. So I just try to handle it, but again, it is a demo for understanding, not a perfect production code. So. We say if there is no numeric column, there is no way we can render the chart, so we're going to fail the chart. Right? So you got that. So what are you going to do now? So we saw this. These are KQL, right? Let's run a SQL for a second. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the SQL Insight. The moment I click on the SQL Insight, again, it comes the same window. But since this is using the same page, this prompt will come in, but it initiates the new session though, right? The text box, because of the Blazor, the values are displayed here. So I can type it here. Maybe find number of users by tenant as an example, right? And then I run it over here. But now this goes to the same exact code, but this time it uses it sends the meta prompt to tell it is a KQL. You have to do all these things, and then writing against the KQL. So there is some tenant ID, some values over there, but it says the chart is not there. I'm not able to fix this one for the demo, but because this comes as a null column. But if this had a value here, something say null, then it would bring a chart to here, right? And I can ask anything I want. Find users first name start. No, I'm not even giving it. My column is called a first name. I just now writing a space over it. Starts with A. And by maybe a tenant. So I can give whatever I want, right? It's trying to go there. See whether it brings any data. Right. It's again the first column is coming as a null, so it's not bringing anything. But if that column, there is invalid data. That's all I'm trying to say. If there is invalid data, you're going to see invalid chart. It's not going to come. So this tenant has this many data. So if you can curate this data not to be listed, then you will have the chart and seeing the chart. All right. Now we played with we explained about the chat pilot. We walk you through the demo of how this works. But now what? There is a chat application here. You can download and play with it. Okay, so once you have this application, the same folder where you download from the chat Copilot, there is also a web UI. Okay, so I'll show you what we did. So you can run that app and then you can interact. That is how you're going to learn how the semantic kernel is going to help for you to build the applications. Okay. Once it starts. Any question while we're waiting for?
Udai, so before you were saying if you're in a session, it'll remember you just asked this question and it'll build upon the answer. Is there a way to save it? Let's say I come back a day later. Would that mean
you can come back a day later, yes.
Or something, or?
Absolutely, yeah. You can store it and then you can retrieve the sessions. So I'm going to show you right now. Okay. That's the next demo. So how you can resume back 2 days later, 3 days later. Even that's true if you go to the gemini.google.com or chatgpt.com, right? It is going to have some sort of left navigation that tells you what you've been chatting, right? You click on the chat. No, you've been, say for example, you've been chatting last 1 week. It will write, all the different chat sessions that you opened. and then you go and play with it. But look at this case, right? We said first thing, write something about Boston, right? That is how we were manually doing it. So it is, it did something. And then we started the 2 sessions over here, right? See, this is about the select SQL. Remember, we asked about this is the user prompt, right? And then that is the one. This is the first one we asked about it. That is the SQL. But this is not going to come like this plain. It's going to come like, 3 backticks behind and forward, and we need to parse it. That's why if you look at the code, we were doing some parsing, okay? I don't know this can return. Oh, okay. This, see that metadata I set. This is the metadata I set, right? It has all the columns that I set it. But this is the KQL query. This is over here, and then it has all the metadata I set, right? Use the summarize, always name on the result account, all those things. But now you can chat here too. You can ask anything you want. So what we did over here, this is what you resume the session, right? You started from the one application. Now you are in another application, but I'm going to chat asking something, right? So now I can say, what is, within last 1 month. So this is only 24 hours, right? So now let's say within last 1 month. And it's going to bring it. Here's the query. You see that? Ago 30 days. Here ago 24 hours. Here 30 days. Where did we create that session? We created over here. We created over, here, right? That's one application. Where we are changing, we're changing it over here. That's a completely different application. We're resuming the chat. Okay. And then similarly here, since it has all the context, it's going to take it and passes a history back to the system. The more the data you pass in, more the money you have to spend it. There is a calculator, how much it costs to send the tokens. You can learn it online. Right. That's all I have right now, I guess. So let's go back to the slide. And as I said before, I'll chat this URL. You can download, you can go and get this app. If you want to, you can play with these sample codes. Any question?
I know like ChatGPT, like before would it draw images? Now it does. Would you have to do any modification for this?
No, I think you can simply say, if you use a ChatGPT UI, you don't have to do anything. But if you, I think you can ask it here too. Let's try. This prompt sometimes may work, right? So I'm going to go back here. Chat. Create an image for the last query. Oh, no, because we said that. I put the query over here. Yeah, I don't know where it's going to go. Where is it? Where is an image? It was there somewhere. Oh, yeah, it's coming now. Oh, it did something. I don't know what it is, but but because our persona is completely different. If I modify this persona, it might put a right message over here. And not only that, you can also say, you can also say to a different language too. So you don't have to speak in English. In the chat interface, you can put in, maybe go back to the interface here. Then I go here, and I go here, right? And then I run it. You have to look at it. You can say it, right? It worked. It knows what the hell it is. If you're still not believing, you can go back and look at it on the chat application. If you look at it over here, the chat, this is the input, right? And then this is the output. All right, that's a little demo for you to understand how the KQL SQL can be generated. I hope you enjoyed it. If no question, we can close the talk. Any question?